Welcome to CMO Dialogues hosted by Anika Sharma, the podcast where marketing leaders explore the intersection of creativity, strategy, and technology. From AI to data-driven storytelling, CMO Dialogues explores how C-suite leaders are reshaping customer engagement and driving growth. Bold insights, real stories, the future of marketing straight from the Mavericks.
Hi, John. Welcome to the CMO podcast, the CMO Dialogues podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. Just to introduce myself really quickly, my name is Anika Sharma, and I'm the markets head for CMO Tech and Services at LTIMindtree. This is a brand new podcast that we have launched to have this very, very important dialogue around CMOs, around businesses, and how they play a role in some of the largest companies in the world. John, welcome. I don't think I can do justice to your introduction, so I would love for you to say a few words.
Anika, it's so great to be here, and thank you for letting me. I think this is the first guest on your CMO podcast. And what a great way to kick things off with regards to maybe some thoughts around the overall theme of tech and CMOs as you start to bring CMOs onto this podcast, kind of grounding it in some thoughts from a research firm like ISG. So John Boccuzzi, Jr., the president of ISG Research. We are based in Stamford, Connecticut, and we are the largest third-party advisory firm in the world. What that means is we help bring tech to large enterprises and help them make those decisions around what providers, like an LTIMindtree, or what tech might be most useful, and then bring that buyer and seller together in a very structured process so they end up with the best results.
So I would call that an understatement, because if I remember correctly, how many cents to every dollar of IT does ISG actually, advise in the world? I think you have a statistic.
Yeah, we do. It's so we do about 20 billion a year in TCV, about 200 billion of influence, and that's roughly about 50 to 55% of the overall third-party advised deals globally. So it is, we are the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to advisory.
Aren't I lucky to have you on this show? But, I'm one of those. So I come from the brand world, right? I used to be at the Ogilvy's and the BBDOs of the world. And I've been very lucky enough to actually handle some really, really large brands, including at LTIMindtree, right? I had an opportunity to lead the largest beauty brand in the world, right? And one of the things that did for me was actually help me understand business better, right? So even though we were their tech partners, I think we were very lucky. I was very lucky to actually work with people, technology leaders at these companies, which actually understood business. And that's one of the reasons that we've actually launched this dialogue, I should say, is because one of the things I've realized is that in today's world, technology can no longer be for the sake of technology, right? I mean, technology somewhere has to ladder up to business. Now, it is easy as that sounds. It's actually very difficult because many of these groups are working as independent departments, right? So, for example, for the CIO to understand where the CTO comes in and the CTO to understand where business comes in is actually difficult instead of a very simple mindset which says everything should be business first. So I don't know what you're seeing in the companies that you are, working with, partnering with. What are some of the trends that, you're looking at? And I'd love to know your point of view on this.
Yeah, Anika, I think it's a great place to start. Look, tech has evolved dramatically. I've been in tech, mostly startups earlier in my career, a good almost 30 years. And when you think about where we were 20 years ago, even, the CIO, CTO sat in a basement with a big server, most likely IBM, and things ran, and there was, code from COBOL or something that is rarely used today, and really the decisions on tech were made in that basement. And when you think about where we are today, the CIO is sitting next to the CMO and the CFO, because the tech is so much closer to actual business experiences, right? It's not just keeping laptops up or maybe the simplicity of a website. It's now normalizing disparate data sets on consumer sentiment, social media, product design and development, all these different areas. And that server, frankly, still works beautifully. And are we moving to the cloud? Sure. So some of our clients are thinking, like, how do I migrate some of these things to the cloud and leave certain things on the server and some things in the cloud? So there's a lot of big, giant decisions going on. What I will share is it's moving faster. So if you think about 2020 or 2010 and an SAP implementation, or 2000 SAP implementation, it was a 7-year job. So if you got onto an SAP implementation, that was your career for 7 years.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about standing up, big ERP systems in months, okay, not years, okay, or making a move from SAP to S/4HANA. These are and this transition, and it's not going to be years, right? So all of this is moving faster, and that communication between a CEO, a CMO, a CFO, all with the CIO and a CTO is happening much quicker and side by side. Does that help?
Yeah, so it's almost like what you're saying is it's like a round table instead of a hierarchy, right? So they're all people rowing the same boat.
Yeah.
And so a couple of things that I'm taking away from this conversation, that we just had, which is one is that these decisions, even though they are still really, really large, gigantic decisions, they are happening far quicker, right? Instead of like taking months. So I'm assuming that the decision making is faster. The implementation is faster, and therefore the agility that is required in the organizations is a default, right? So which means that even organizations that were not agile by nature, right, in their mindset now need to be, because that is almost the need of the hour. Especially, I believe, after the pandemic, you perhaps saw that a lot more. Is that right?
100%. Look, if you think about the pandemic, and there were all these weird anomalies, right? Boat sales and RV sales went through the roof.
Yes.
All these things that we didn't, supply chain for cars, right? All these things that we weren't expecting.
Right? Home offices, right?
Yeah, home offices. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, like overnight, who knew you couldn't get one of your a mic for a home office, right? You couldn't get it from Best Buy or anybody else because no one was thinking about what was going to happen. But the speed at which we adapted, right? And I'll share a funny story, and it kind of relates with regards to future of work. 2019, March of 2019, I think it was March 9th or 10th, I was doing a keynote at our Future Workplace Summit for ISG in New York City. And I was talking about where we would be in 5 years.
Wow.
With how work was going to be done. And it was about this idea that there'd be this hybrid of people working from home, et cetera. And Anika, literally 3 days later, the world shut down and everybody went home. So I just, the acceleration of how decisions are being made and that it's a unified approach. Think about it. It's not fair to go and say to a CIO, just figure out how to create a better client experience in 5 different languages for my call center.
Yep.
They understand tech and how it's going to integrate. It's the CMO or the chief experience officer or the call center lead that's going to run that call center that has to think about, like, okay, right now I have to be on 4 different continents. I have to have these different language capabilities.
Yep.
I have these lifts during Valentine's and Mother's Day.
Yep.
But if I could use AI and I can use this language translation tools, how would I optimize my business? And now all of a sudden you've got a CMO and a chief experience officer working with a CIO to figure out that solution together. Does that help?
How many places are you seeing this work really well? Meaning, how much of it is, because it almost seems like this is like a need of the hour, but the 10 years ago, I'd have been naive enough to say, this is something that should be done tomorrow. Today, perhaps the more mature me understands that even big ideas require, seismic changes, right? In an organization. So it's a mindset is the biggest thing that needs to change. And then other, structures and the organization can rally behind it. So I think the pandemic has taught us a lot. And one of that is, that we need to work more cohesively. We need to be more agile. we definitely have to run at a pace that perhaps many organizations were not used to, right? So I would love, you are in touch with companies every day, right, in your role. And so which are some of the companies or the brands, organizations that you think are getting it right, or perhaps at least on the right path?
Yeah, it's hard because some of the clients there's competitive advantages and NDAs in place and things like that. But
Right.
we have clients across hospitality, quick serve. I would say are two of the areas that are moving fastest in this area of understanding that connection point between customer experience and technology, and that collaboration between, a CMO, again, an experience officer, operations with a CIO. The other area that we're seeing quick movement, and it sounds strange, but with AI, is in BFSI. So banking,
Wow. Yeah.
financial, and insurance. These are areas that
Yeah.
are starting to really connect the dots. So like I recently I saw some tech where, again, an insurance company is again thinking about experientially, what's the biggest issue for you and I, God forbid, if we were part of that giant hurricane in Florida, right?
Yeah.
You lose your whole life in 24 hours,
Yeah.
okay?
Or look at
Or the
the LA
fires,
fires. Right? Yeah,
yeah, the
exactly.
fires in
Exactly.
California. And now today with technology, people are able to think about this experience is I can go around the house with a camera or just my phone and take just a video of my home. And then it takes that and looks at all the things that are in the home, a television set, a refrigerator, blah, blah, blah. And then God forbid if your house was destroyed, within 24 hours, it actually gives you all the sites to buy
Beautiful.
everything and repurchase your entire home. Now, granted, the photographs are lost, and maybe there's some tech that'll come there too. But Anika, that's the exciting stuff that I see.
Yeah.
Of course, these catastrophes we don't want to see it happen. But
Yes.
when you think about insurance that felt just old and dated,
Yeah.
that's modern. Like that's exciting to me, right? Is
Yeah.
is what a much better client experience, customer experience. You're in a car accident, and within 24 hours, you've got your car already a check in your hand, or maybe it's handed to you on
Yeah.
site by the insurance agent while the car's being picked up from the pickup, the towing truck, right? That's where we're going.
Absolutely. And I think I wrote about this, right? I was in a car accident last year and I was on my way. I think I was very tired. I was going to try and, climb Mount Washington in the middle of Connecticut and in a really, really small town. And I remember within 30 seconds, my emergency contacts knew that I was in a car accident. Now imagine
Wow.
if yeah, and I can't tell you, like I fell in love with Apple all over again, just with that one teeny tiny thing that they did, and I didn't have to tell them I was in a car accident just by the shake, right? And they're like, it looks like you've been in a
Yeah.
car accident. Within the next 30 seconds, we're going to inform you. And it went as a personal message. So meaning
Yeah.
I came to know later that it, including my children, the message went and said, I have been in a car accident and you are being informed because you are my emergency contact. It is so
Yeah.
personalized. Now, to take your idea further, imagine if they had also connected with my insurance company, right? So
Yeah.
that immediately, a claim could be formed, or at least somebody from the insurance, even if it was a bot, could like reach out and say, hey, is everything okay? It looks like you've been in a car accident. Is there anything you need immediately? I mean, it would have been so nice because these are systems talking to each other, right? I mean, these are real solutions for real people, right? Like you and me, hopefully to never be in a car accident, but something that's actually of value, right? Now, I'm assuming that you can't do these things without having a really amazing CTO/CIO organization, right?
Yeah.
But, something that you said earlier before we began this podcast resonated with me. You said, Anika, you can't start with the technology, right?
Yeah.
But please just tell us what you said because it really resonated with me.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake to put the responsibility and the accountability on the CIO to think about starting with the tech. You've
Yeah.
got to start with the day in the life, and the providers that are having the most success are the ones, and I've even seen one go as far as actually creating a comic book of the experience.
Wow.
And when you give a comic book to an LTIMindtree and the CIO, you can go together and say, is this how the day in the life of Anika's car accident would happen?
Yes.
And that, rather than saying to a CIO is, hey, can you figure out how to make sure that a phone and just find the most cost-effective approach to doing that. So those are the things I think, Anika, you have to think about. And this is where the industry's going is it's no longer, and it hasn't been for a while, but it's not your mess for less. Okay.
Yes.
I don't need LTIMindtree to come in and just be cheaper labor, okay?
Yep.
And just, what I need is a thought leader to come in and help me think about the greater good of my brand, okay?
And you're telling me that organizations are coming with this approach even when they are doing RFPs around tech? Is that what you're saying? That's the approach I see, okay?
Yeah. Let me give you a great example of this. Is so there was a very large, really the largest fluid taker, like blood tests, and I can't think of the technical name, but they had an RFP out for they needed to do a new customer experience, client experience. Okay.
Yes.
So everybody came in and stellar job, great presentations. One came in and they had all gone and gotten fluids drawn, blood, etc. And then created, here's the security risks, here's the experience risk, they won the business.
Wow.
Because they're thinking about it from the human side, right? So it's this translation, Anika, that has to happen. And here's the data I think you'll find interesting. So right now, on average, a large enterprise client will have 56 providers on average. Some have more, some have less, but the average is 56.
56 providers? That a client has?
Yeah.
They might need a provider just to handle all the providers, right? Don't you think so? I mean, like a provider nanny, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot, John.
That's what GovernX is for. We have a governance tool to do this. But the real business challenge here is, and what you'll find is what we're seeing in our research, in our Market Lens research, and if anybody wants it, they can reach out to me. I will get you a copy of this. But what's happening is in 2025-26, what you're going to find is a consolidation to the top 5 providers, the largest, to just do the work, right? The biggest strategic stuff.
Because you can't go wrong with them, right? They have their nuts and bolts together.
I want to get the best price. I want to get the best price. I'm just going to leverage it because I'm going to give them the middle. I'm going to get rid of. Okay, this is where you need to be scared. If you're in the middle, they're going to get rid of all that. Because they need the funding for what, Anika? They need the funding for agentic AI, thought leadership, customer experience, all the new. So you're going to find this whole new tech provider that are these small businesses that are innovative, new, buzzing. LTIMindtree probably has small groups of those. But you're going to fit either into this new dynamic section or one of the larger 3 to 5 that are going to solve kind of the big heavy lifting.
The middle ground is going to go, What about companies that are specializing, for example, in data or in analytics? These little.
That'll be in that bottom layer, 100%, because how do I normalize all these disparate data sets, right? This is the thing we have to think about agentic AI, and by the way, this has not changed for 25 years. Okay,
it's just making a buzz now.
We've already talked about silos of data, right? I was in the business. I had a software company, Data Alchemy, and we normalized disparate data sets for the consumer packaged goods industry, right? It's always been a challenge. Now we call them data lakes and data swamps and blah blah blah. The point being is all this normalization is still complicated and robust. Now AI is going to help out. Here's the key: is though. If you can't get the right types of data into this, then all AI is going to do is get you bad answers faster.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so therefore, I think even investing, and not to mention investing in first-party data. You can't even buy data from somewhere outside, right? I mean, these are, in some ways, it almost seems simple, right? Get to know your people better. Get to know your potential customers better. And I think what I'm hearing from you is to say that because of this basic fundamentals that companies are coming back to, they're also asking their partners, especially the tech partners, to almost be like an extension of that thinking. Am I correct? And so people who are going to come in. Now, I do want to take a step back though, right? In the last 3-4 years, there was this entire conversation about cost consolidation. And perhaps one of the reasons for that was because of the pandemic, when we were all at home, everyone thought that e-commerce is going to be the next big thing and nobody's going to walk into the stores. And one of the things that actually I have a lot of passion for is this thing called the revenge buying theory, right? So as soon as the stores actually, and this is not my term, but I believe that this whole revenge buying, thing that happened when all the stores were, open again, people stood in lines because they were like, you didn't allow us to buy for the last 2 years. We are going to spend all our money. And, funny as that sounds, companies were not ready, brands were not ready for it. So people went back to stores and realized all the reasons why they didn't really like coming back to stores, right? So I believe that there was a time when in the last 2-3 years, there was a move for consolidation, correct? Because they were probably trying to recover some money, but now there's a shift happening again. I mean, just can you shed some light on this trend?
Yeah, and I would say a big chunk of that, Anika, was some of what you're talking about, but a big piece that we saw is, and we wrote about it, is 5 years ago, the big whole thing was lift and shift to the cloud. Okay.
Right.
And all of a sudden, somehow, everything was going to leave these servers in the basement and go to the cloud.
Yeah.
And there were all these firms that, we were born in the cloud. And I raised a red flag. Like, if you were born in the cloud, how are you going to help me get all this data that's been working for 40 years in the basement on Fifth Avenue to this imaginary cloud?
Beautiful.
And so there was a ton of cost optimization to help fund all this. Now, that died off quickly. It was an 18, 24-month trend, okay? AWS, Google, all these guys, Azure loved it. And that came down dramatically, okay? Then cost optimization came because of the economy and everything else, okay? So there's always going to be this layer of cost optimization. Our research shows that the IT budget is not growing, okay? So it has to come from somewhere. It has to come from somewhere.
Actually, is it degrowing? Is it actually shrinking?
It's flat.
Oh, it's flat.
It's flat.
Okay.
It's flat. So it's flat. But the point is that you have raises, you have tech spend, all these things are going up. So you have to find ways to constantly consolidate and optimize. So now we've got this more normal hybrid cloud, right? It's going to be mainframe, public cloud, private cloud, etc. What the next trend is look at the underlying piece of all this agentic and AI piece is going to be is the data, like we just said, right?
Right.
The key about that data is that first party data that you said is the proprietary.
Yep.
Because look at Walmart, Target, whatever it's going to be. They're just stores. They've got lots of widgets. A lot of them are the same. How am I going to differentiate myself? You're going to differentiate yourself because you've got proprietary data that you can be smarter about it, right?
Yep.
I remember back, now this is dating myself, but again, it didn't have AI involved. But Walmart, when there was a hurricane in Florida, what was the number one SKU that Walmart shipped into California, into Florida for the stores? What was the number one SKU? 4 days before a hurricane.
Umbrellas? No.
Strawberry Pop-Tarts.
Wow.
Because what they found from their retail link data, they had their own proprietary data, is every time there was a hurricane, 4 days before, they would sell out of, they would be out of.
This is amazing. This is what I call an aha moment. This is like, who would have thought that there is an association between hurricanes and, strawberry. Yeah. Oh, wow.
But today we could have found it out much quicker, right?
Yes.
That was a really smart human that kind of put the dots together. Another good one that a human put dots together was they were using our software data alchemy to normalize data, and it was sharing plow, and they make Nicorette. And every so often, a state would sell out of Nicorette.
Wow.
And so there'd be no product on the shelf, and that's terrible for everybody, right? Terrible for Walgreens, terrible for Nicorette, sharing plow. What they figured out was when taxes were going to go up in the state for cigarettes, Nicorette went through the roof.
Wow.
So they started to plan promotions, end caps, etc., the month before or the month during the tax increase, and they crushed it.
Wow.
Okay. So this is where AI, Anika, and the CMO is going to have so much fun in asking thoughtful questions around the data to find these unique things, right?
Yes. But also, and absolutely. I mean, it sounds like magic. And I always say marketers are magicians, because with the same stuff that you have, without changing the formula, without changing the size of the bottle, the shape of, without changing anything, how do you make money out of nothing, right? And I think these are just such great examples of going back and saying what matters, right? What matters. And then let's look at a trend before it's actually a trend. and get there, right? I mean, these are case studies, right? I mean, these should be discussed in business school. So, I mean, my heart beats for stuff like this, right? But I think one of the things that CMOs have realized, and I do want to come back to the role of the CMOs because I think it's just getting more and more difficult, is that they've realized that yes, these are great ideas, but they cannot happen at scale unless they partner with the right tech partners. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah. You have to have the right tech partners. You have to have a CIO with vision, right? That's going to be supportive of it.
Yes.
And then you've got to think about why you're doing what, right? So the CMOs, and there have been some that are taking and utilizing AI, let's say, to create a commercial.
Right.
That may not be the best move right now, right?
Correct.
It takes away the authenticity, all the rest of it. Yep. So the CMO has to be thoughtful about what tech partner they're working with, and is that tech partner a thought leader? This is again why that compression of I want 5 top providers to do all the big heavy lifting, and I want all the innovators down here. You want to be an innovator. You want to be in that C-suite and adding value to understanding what that CMO and that brand is doing. And I've seen tons of your posts across, key brands that you've worked with, right, at LTIMindtree. And again, it shows that authenticity around you actually understanding the brand and how technology will impact it. And look, here's the good news is, and a good friend of mine shared this stat with me, and whether it's completely accurate or not with regards to the numbers, it makes a lot of sense. He says, look, at 90% of the world is pretty much lazy. He goes, you're only competing with 10%.
That's that's a worse statistic than the Pareto principle of 80-20, but yeah.
So I think what you have to think about, Anika, is how do you find that 10% provider to work with a 10% enterprise so you can create that 1% solution?
Oh my God, this is like a formula. John, say that again because that was so beautiful. How do you take the 10%? Say that again, please.
The 10%. How do you find that 10% provider, the top 10% provider?
Yep.
And it has to be a 10% enterprise. It needs to be a CMO that's part of that 10% group.
Yeah.
And if those two work together, you create a 1% solution, meaning your top 1% idea. It's going to be
just
world class.
Yeah, this is so beautiful. And it seems very doable because it looks like there is equal hunger on both sides, right? Organizations are hungry for something like this, right? And tech partners are hungry to work with organizations that have a real need. So it almost seems like this is something that can happen today more than, say, for example, 5-6 years ago or 10 years ago when people would have been like, we are good the way we are today. We don't really have the need, business is growing as usual. We don't really need to disrupt anything, or it might take years to disrupt something. Why do you want to? I hear this all the time. Why do you want to, break something that hasn't broken, right? Or why do you want to reinvent something that doesn't need to be? And I'm like, because can't you see the tsunami coming? Like, I can see the tsunami coming. How can't you, right? So it almost seems like today, marketeers, companies, organizations are hungry today for their companies, their partners to become an extension of their brand leaders, right? Brand thought leaders. And I think almost like be in the trenches together, right? Instead of work as an outsider in that organization. There seems to be a desperation, a hunger. Do you see that too?
This is why this is so critical is think about you coming into a meeting with a cosmetics brand.
Yep.
But you and your firm, in this example, just use LTIMindtree in your example here. You're going to come in with hospitality experience. You're going to come in with travel experience. You're going to come in with healthcare experience. And I will share with you 100% is those experiences will add value to the conversation for that cosmetic firm. So this is why it's so valuable for a CMO and a CEO and a CIO to want to work with
together.
Yes, because you're coming in with all these other unique ideas.
So what's the issue today? How can partners like us facilitate that? Where do you see this is the need of the hour, right? But I'm assuming it's not happening. So, and I don't think it makes the CMO's job easy, right? The CMO today, I believe, has a very difficult job. It's almost like, yeah, you're the face of the company, but do you really own, the customer and justify the fact that we need a CMO? I can't even believe you're having a conversation that says CMOs have to justify themselves. I think it's heartbreaking. But the
Yeah.
point is, somebody has to own the end consumer like me, right? I mean, if I am upset, I cannot be broken into parts and owned by so and so part is owned by the CTO and the CIO and the CMO, right? To me, the CMO is also the chief consumer officer, right? Meaning the
Yeah.
chief customer officer. They own me. They should know who I am, and what is my problem. Because when I go to an organization that has 200,000 people, when I, tweet to them, I expect someone to respond to me as
Yeah.
if they are a human, right? Whether it's a Nike or an Adidas or, like I expect them to respond to me like they are a company of one, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like this is the need of the hour. But what in your mind, John, so two questions. One is, what do you think CMOs should be doing? Should they partner better in the kind of SIs that their counterparts or the peers are trying to get on board? Two, how do you think partners like us can actually help facilitate this so that the Anikas and the Johns of the world can be happier with the stuff that they, the brands that they continue to get from these companies?
Yeah, and I'll be selfish for a minute because this is where I think we add value and are useful in the industry. We track over 2,000 service providers and over 2,500 software providers. So my point being is there are tons of choices. Okay.
Yes.
And it's funny, Smuckers did a study years ago where they had one store with 4 options of jam and one store with 26 options, and the store with 4 options sold more jam. Okay.
Yep.
So
Yes.
so what we try to do is we help a CMO and a CIO and a CEO better understanding specifically what are you looking for. Okay. Because
Yeah.
sometimes there's a lot of smoke and mirror because everyone's coming at them with the art of the possibles. Okay. But it's 2,500 arts of the possible. No decision is going to be made. Okay. So you've got to get somebody in the middle that just, I hope it's us, but if whatever, somebody that starts to get to a practical point and then narrows it down to understanding who are those 5 or 7, and then a decision will be made. It's interesting. When we're involved in helping that process, it's 98% that a decision will be made and money will be spent and an application will be deployed. 98%. When we're not involved and it's done just between, it can be anywhere as low as 50 to 70% because of that stagnation of what do I do? Oh my God, this looks good. That looks good. This looks good.
Yeah.
They forget what they were originally going after. And it's not your fault. It's not, it's not certainly not LTIMindtree's. It's just that there's 2,500 options. It's too many. So I think you need to help. Maybe it's a workshop. It's a collaboration to truly identify what you're doing and then utilize data and research to narrow that down. Yeah. And then bring in that group to start to understand what the art of the possible is. Does that help?
Yeah. In fact, I also want to come back to that important statistic that you said that there are 56 providers that any particular company has. If I had 56 friends, right? First of all, they can't be counted as an inner circle, right? Yeah. I would love to know what each of those 56 friends meant to me. If I did a word association, if I said, for example, John, right? And I know the word that'll come for John, super smart, ally, great to have in my corner, in our corner. But the point is, you shouldn't have to struggle for what that person stands for, right? Now, I'm assuming that it's not just enough to be one of the 56. Actually, one needs to be one of those 5 or 3, whether as the knowledge provider, right? Or as the person who provides stability. Either you're in that top band or you're in that specialist bottom brand, but you cannot not be the person who is not associated with value. And what I'm getting from your conversation is that value cannot just be about more bang for your buck, right? It cannot just be about, that how much am I getting in return for the dollar that I spend? So let's go after the cheapest, people that I get or the cheapest services or the most consultative services, because somewhere that is going to be losing ground, right? Because you can only get that much more efficient, right? You can only consolidate that much. At the end of the day, that value will have to be up the value chain, and therefore it's important for us to have conversations with business. I don't know whether many service providers are actually having conversations with business, right? And I wonder what that barrier is, John. So what advice do you have for CMOs to talk better with tech partners, because they cannot do what they're trying to do without that support
Yeah.
and that largeness of scale? And how can tech partners work better with CMOs, right,
Yeah.
and businesses to understand where they're coming from, to the point where maybe we can even complete their sentences?
Yeah, a couple things, and this is a good litmus test for service providers that are listening. And you've done a good job at this, and I'm sure you've got lots of examples of where this happens. If you're getting phone calls from the CMO, the CFO, the business suite,
Yeah.
okay, then you are doing it right. If you're getting calls from procurement and the CIO, there's an
Ah,
opportunity. Okay, so that's just
yes.
that's your litmus test to understand where you are.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next is don't talk about the ones and zeros.
Yep.
Okay, don't give us the good news of the next widget. Okay, and the name that I'm not going to remember of what you're doing, the solution you have. Okay.
Yep.
Be sympathetic and understand and speak language of the CMO and that business.
Yep.
Talk about the widgets that they have, etc. Do a comic book, whatever it is, but don't worry. The ones and zeros will happen later.
Yeah.
Give me the vision of how it's going to happen, and I'll give you a good example. Somebody they were doing digital twin, okay.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is okay. Digital, what does that mean, right?
You saw me laugh, right?
Yeah. So when you started the conversation with digital twin,
Yeah.
you already lost me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's how she started the presentation. She said, "I want to share a story about my son when he was 5 years old.
Wow.
And he got into a serious bike accident with a major head injury. And when we got to the hospital, they had to strap him down because they needed to get him into the MRI machine. And he's bleeding profusely. And the doctors are holding him down. The doctors are pulling me back. I'm screaming." She says, "John, it was a complete mess."
Yeah.
She says, "I'm with this firm and I'm working on digital twin technology, so no child has to go through that again."
Wow.
And I get goosebumps when I say it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not sure what this is, but I want to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
She ended the presentation with a picture of a 35-year-old that said, "By the way, my son's doing just fine."
Wow.
Okay. So Anika, my point
Sold.
being is, start with
yes.
if it's Chrysler, start with the day in the life of how a consumer's utilizing one of their cars and vehicles, right?
Yeah.
And later on, you'll get to how the ones and zeros all get shaped up. I promise you, your differentiator will not be the ones and zeros.
Yes.
I can find any of the 2,500, probably at least 500 of those to do it exceptional.
Yes.
What will differentiate you is your approach and the connection you have with that CMO on the vision of how they want to treat their customer.
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, John, I've got goosebumps just listening to this, because it seems so fundamental. And I mean, I carry a notebook everywhere, and I've got like a whole book of John quotes, and this is going to go in there as well. But I do, while we wrap this up, of course, I always like to end with, what are the three things that you would like to leave behind? But before I ask you this question, because I know you and I are both uber passionate about customer experience. So I did want to, take a minute, because I know that you're very, very passionate about it. And I just wanted to, take a pause and put a spotlight on it and say, why are you so passionate about it? And of course, I love your blue glasses. But really, I mean, for someone who is now advising companies, doing research on some of the top, firms in the world, 2000 and counting, why does it all just boil down to this whole customer experience? Why for you is it important?
I think it comes down to the simplicity of, as the world gets smaller because of everything we have, the availability of transportation, brands, the speed at which things can move, the ability to differentiate becomes harder and harder. That last horizon that truly can create differentiation is the customer experience. We all have customers, right?
Yeah.
So, I've got customers that are enterprise and service providers. You've got customers. Your customers have customers, right? We all have customers. And again, because the ones and zeros, because the general fabrics I might use in a product, et cetera, aren't going to be the differentiator. It's the experience at which those connection points come together that are going to make the win or loss. Does that make sense?
Yes. In fact, I know you've written a book on the subject. I know you talk about this. I know you have put various comments on this. I know you have so many, posts that you mentioned this. So obviously it's a subject very close to your heart. And I think it brings me back to what you said, right? You can't start with the tech. You got to start with the business issue, right? So if you were to leave us with three thoughts, right, as we continue this very, very, very important dialogue, I think, with this very, very important C-suite executive called the CMO, what are the three things that, you think that we should all be, left with or should think about?
The big question. Look, here's what I would say. Speak the language of your client. So speaking with the CMO, make sure you understand the empathy, empathize and understand what they're talking. Don't talk to ones and zeros.
Beautiful.
Be part of the 10%. And I say that with sincerity because I'm telling you, this is not easy to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 10% is 10%. It's not another. So be part of the 10%.
Yeah.
And partner with 10% clients. Some clients aren't 10%. You're going to treat that differently. Okay. Because the 10% will be the 1%.
To create that 1% of magic.
And that will be game changing, right? You think about Amazon that sold books online, which I still think was a stupid idea. And look where they are today.
Yeah.
Right? Because they understood the customer, right? They understood the customer.
I bought 19 books from Amazon in the last 3 days. So it's working.
It's crazy. I'm about to buy 2 because I'm going on a road trip. So anyway, it's mind blowing. And then the final thing is again, are you truly talking about the voice of the customer, or are you stuck in things that are cost optimization? Doesn't mean you can't cost optimize, but are you trying to solve the problem? And I promise you, it's not always the most inexpensive deal. In fact, only less than 35% of the time, the low bid wins. Okay, so it's not about low bid. If you think about low price, that is not the answer here. The answer is that connection between what the problem statement was and the solution you're providing and how that's going to create a different experience. So don't focus on price and cost optimization. Those will happen. Focus on the outcomes of what the solution is.
John, I'm going to bottle this and make sure that all the CMOs in the world hear this. I'm on a mission. I'm extremely, extremely passionate about brands. And at, LTIMindtree, we're hoping to start this very important dialogue. It is my intent to get, CMOs onto this podcast. I am so happy that you are our first guest, that we're kicking this off with you. I do hope that you will come back, right? When we perhaps have a CMO panel and keep all of us real. I take away so much today. I think, again, to summarize your 3 points, one is speak the consumer language, right? Speak the business language. The second thing is be part of the 10%, right? And see whether you're really approaching it from the day in the life of. To focus on value, not as in from a cost perspective, but the value that you're actually providing to the organization. And actually, finally, at least, from our conversation, it's something that is so simple, but it always sticks with me, which is that storytelling matters. I have to tell you that I'm never going to forget the story of that 5-year-old boy now who got into an accident. And what a great way to tell a story. I'm assuming that if there were 10 people making a presentation to that particular potential client, that client will remember that story of the 5-year-old boy, So it's a great way to be empathetic and a great way to leave a lasting impression. John, I'm deeply grateful to you. Thank you. I hope this has been half as much fun as it has been for me. And I can't thank you enough for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you, Anika. And thanks so much for actually making this a mission. If you're able to help and get the voice of the CMO out there to the marketplace, I think this is going to be goodness for everybody involved. So thank you for taking on this mission.
Thank you, John.
Take care.
You've been listening to CMO Dialogues, powered by LTIMindtree. We create transformative digital experiences that reach over 1 billion lives, driving deeper brand connections and lasting impact. Subscribe on your favorite platform so you never miss the insights shaping the future of marketing. Bold insights, real stories, the future of marketing straight from the Mavericks. See you next time on CMO Dialogues.